Okay, let's start class. First, let's review balance of blood coagulation and anticoagulation. Coagulation system. Now the balance include coagulation system, anticoagulation system, and fibrinolytic system. During the balance, platelet and vasoendothelial cell have an important role. Now, we have the coagulation system. Now, coagulation system include coagulation factors and platelets. Coagulation pathway include intrinsic coagulation pathway and extrinsic coagulation pathway. Now, intrinsic coagulation pathway stimulates coagulation factor 12. Now, cardiac export can stimulate coagulation factor 12. Now, factor 12, activated factor 12 can stimulate coagulation factor 9. Factor 9, factor 11. Factor 11 activated, so stimulate coagulation factor 9. Factor 9, factor 8 form complex, and the next stimulate coagulation factor 10. Factor 10, factor 5 form complex. It's called the activator of prothrombin. Now stimulate prothrombin form thrombin. Now thrombin stimulate fibrinogen and form fibrin. Now, fibrin form a fibrin clot. Now, it is intrinsic coagulation pathway. Extrinsic coagulation pathway must have tissue factor. Now, if tissue damage, release tissue factor. Now, tissue factor move into the circulation, coagulation factor, and tissue factor and the coagulation factor 7 form complex. The complex has made coagulation factor 10. Now the next seem to intrinsic coagulation pathway. Now it is intrinsic and extrinsic coagulation pathway. Now platelet can, if platelet complex, also form a clot. Now if platelet and the coagulation factors increase, coagulation function will increase and form clot. If coagulation factors decrease, platelet decrease, coagulation function decrease, and hyperbleeding. Now it is coagulation syndrome. Now, if coagulation syndrome is stimulated at the same time, anticoagulation syndrome also stimulated. Now, anticoagulation syndrome include cellular anticoagulation syndrome and body fluid coagulation syndrome. Now, cellular anticoagulation syndrome refer to mononucleotide syndrome. Now, the syndrome can facilitate necrosis, endotoxin, and coagulation factors. So, mononucleotide syndrome have anticoagulation function because it can facilitate or remove coagulation factors, so have anticoagulation function. Now the next, body fluid. Now, body fluid anticoagulation syndrome includes 3: serine protease inhibitors and heparin. Second, protein C syndrome and tissue factor pathway inhibitor. Now, first we have learned serine protease inhibitor refer to antithrombin 3. Now, it belongs to serine protease inhibitor. Now, in our body, some coagulation factors, for example, coagulation factor 7, factor 9, factor 10, now belong to serine protease. So, antithrombin 3 can inhibit activity of these coagulation factors. So, antithrombin 3 have anticoagulation function. Now, the next, protein C system belong to anticoagulation system. So, protein C system, the proteins have anticoagulation function. Now, protein C system include protein C, protein S, and TM. Now first, protein C released by liver. Now, protein C no function. If it activated, form activated protein C, APC, now have anticoagulation function. Now, protein S has enhanced activated protein C function. Now, TM can lead to can inhibit activity of thrombin, and Tm can activate protein C. Now, the next in detail is explained. Now, protein C inactivated. Now, if it is activated from activated protein C, APC have anti-coagulation function. What can activate it? Now, thrombin. Now, if thrombin increase, so thrombin activated protein C from activated protein C. What function of APC? APC can inhibit activity of coagulating factor 5, factor 8. Now, factor 5 inhibit activity of factor 5, so can't form 5, 10 form complex. The complex next stimulated prothrombin. So APC can inhibit intrinsic and extrinsic coagulation pathway. Understand? Now, protein C, APC can inhibit coagulation function. Coagulation can inhibit activity of coagulation factor 8. We know factor 8 and factor 9 form a complex. The next stimulate coagulation factor 10. Now, so APC have coagulation function or anticoagulation function? Anticoagulation function. Now, from it we know coagulation system is activated. At the same time, anticoagulation system is activated. Why? Because coagulation system is activated, what will increase? Thrombin increase. Thrombin also can stimulate protein C from APC. APC have anticoagulation function. So we know coagulation system is activated. At the same time, anticoagulation system also stimulated. Understand? Now, function of protein S. Protein S can enhance function of APC. Now, protein C can enhance function of APC. So, if protein S increase, which function will decrease? Will protein S increase, so can inhibit activity of coagulation factor 5 and factor 8. Understand? So protein C also have anticoagulation function. Now, Tm, what function? Now, Tm is released by vascular endothelial cell. Now, Tm is released by VEC, vascular endothelial cell. The function Tm can combine with thrombin, so lead thrombin function decrease. So Tm have coagulation function or anticoagulation function. It can lead to thrombin function decrease, so have anticoagulation function. Now, at the same time, Tm can stimulate protein C from APC. So Tm have anticoagulation function. Now it is protein C system include protein C, protein S, and Tm. Protein C form now thrombin can stimulate protein C form activated protein C. Protein C can inhibit activity of coagulation factor 5 and factor 8. So protein C activated protein C have anticoagulation function. Protein S can enhance function of APC. So protein S also have anticoagulation function. Tm released by VEC, vascular endothelial cell. Now the function, it can combine with thrombin and lead to activity, can inhibit activity of protein, activity of thrombin. Now Tm also can stimulate protein C form activated protein C. So Tm have anticoagulation function. So we know if protein C decrease, protein S decrease, now Tm decrease. So coagulation function increase or decrease. And coagulation function will have anticoagulation. So if decrease, so anticoagulation function decrease and the coagulation function increase and form clot. If increase, anticoagulation function increase and bleeding. Now it is protein C system. Now the next tissue factor pathway inhibitor. Now we know Tm released by VEC. So if VEC damage, so release Tm will decrease. So anticoagulation function decrease. Now tissue factor pathway inhibitor TFPI. Now it also released by VEC. So if VEC damage, TFPI will decrease. Now it also have anticoagulation function. Now why it have anticoagulation function? First, now we know it is intrinsic or extrinsic coagulation pathway. Tissue damage, tissue factor, so it is extrinsic coagulation pathway. Extrinsic coagulation pathway. Now, TFPI function. First, it can combine with coagulation factor 10 and lead to coagulation factor function decrease. It combined with factor 10, so factor 10 can't combine with coagulation factor 5. Now, can't form the complex. So inhibit extrinsic coagulation pathway. Inhibit coagulation pathway. Now, the second function, TFPI can inhibit the complex function. So also inhibit extrinsic coagulation pathway. So TFPI can inhibit coagulation pathway, so have anticoagulation function. Now it is TFPI hybrid. Hybrid have anticoagulation function. Now hybrid can enhance TFPI release. So if winners, now if transfused hybrid, so coagulation function increase or decrease? It decrease. So the rabbit may be hyperbleeding. Now, do experiment inhibit coagulation function. Now, transfused hyperemia. So, do experiment transfused hyperemia the rabbit. Now, if no hyperemia, maybe found clot in the rabbit. Now, hyperemia function. Hyperemia can enhance release TFPI. TFPI increase. It can combine inhibit activity of the complex. Also, TFPI can combine with coagulation factor 10. So, factor 10 can't combine with coagulation factor 5. Now, no the complex. So, inhibit coagulation pathway. So, hyperemia, TFPI have anticoagulation function. Now, it is anticoagulation system. Now, we know anticoagulation system include how many types? Cellular anticoagulation system and the body fluid anticoagulation system. Now, cellular anticoagulation system refer to mononuclear vaccine system. Now, body fluid coagulation system include three: protein C system. Now, include serine protease inhibitor, protein C system, and tissue factor pathway inhibitor, TFPI. Protein C system also includes three: protein C, protein S, and TF. Now, understand? It is anticoagulation system. Now, coagulation system is activated, and at the same time, anticoagulation system is activated. Now, the next fibrinolytic system also activated. Now, what is fibrinolytic system? Now, fibrinolytic system and the function. Fibrinolytic system include plasminogen activator, plasminogen, plasmid, and plasminogen inhibitor. Now, the system can dissolve the stoppers that have already formed in vessel. Now, to unblock the blood flow. Now, if have clot, so block the vessel, so tissue fluid will decrease. So, fibrinolytic system can dissolve the clot, so the clot disappear. Now, unblock the vessel, unblock. Now, also have tissue repair and regeneration depends on the dissolution of fibrin clot. Now, fibrinolytic system include four parts: fibrinogen activator, plasminogen, plasmid, and plasminogen inhibitor. Now, so what function? Plasminogen activator can stimulate plasminogen from plasmid. Now, inhibitor inhibit plasminogen from plasmid. Understand? Now, what is plasminogen? Plasmid function. Now, the system is activated must have plasminogen activator. Understand? Now, in the blood, plasminogen activator increase, so stimulate the system. Why coagulation system is activated at the same time anticoagulation system activated? The next fibrinolytic system activated. Why the next fibrinolytic system is activated? Why it's activated? It activated must have fibrinogen activator. Now, what is fibrinogen activator? Now, calculate coagulation factor 12, factor 11 belong plasminogen activator. Now, which situation the substance increase? Coagulation system is activated. So, calculate and the coagulation factor 12, factor 11 will increase. They increase because they belong to plasminogen activator. So, lead to plasminogen from plasmid. So, the system is activated. So, we know coagulation system and the anticoagulation system are stimulated. The next fibrinolytic system activated. Understand? Because coagulation system is activated and form plasminogen activator. Now, tissue plasminogen activator and urokinase plasminogen activator, TPA, UPA. TPA and UPA is produced by intrinsic coagulation pathway. Now, during the intrinsic coagulation pathway is activated, can release TPA and UPA. So we know if intrinsic coagulation pathway is activated, what will increase? TPA and UPA will increase. They are what function? They are. Now, it belongs to plasminogen activator, so lead to plasminogen from plasmid. So we know intrinsic or extrinsic coagulation pathway stimulated. What will increase? Plasminogen activator will increase. So fibrinolytic system is activated. So we know if the patient coagulation function increase, coagulation system is activated. So the next, which coagulation function will activated? Anticoagulation, because APC increase, something increase, so APC increase. Anticoagulation function stimulated. Now, plasminogen activator also increase, so fibrinolytic system also stimulated. Now, the next function of plasmid. Plasmid can hydrolyze thrombin and the coagulation factor. Now, hydrothrombin, hydrofibril. So, plasmid, what function? Can lead to the clot dissolved, lead to clot dissolved. So, now lead to clot dissolved. Now, plasmid can hydrolyze thrombin, coagulation factor, and fibril. Plasmid dissolve the fibril, hydrolyze fibril, and form some fibrin degradation product. It called the FDP. Now, plasmid hydrolyze fibril and form fibrin degradation product. It called the FDP. So we know if fibrinolytic system is activated, now plasmid will increase. So the next, in the blood, what will increase? FDP will increase. Now, if we know the patient blood FDP increase, so we know the patient plasmin increase. Fibrinolytic system is activated. Understand? Now, it is fibrinolytic system. Now, in the clinical, now cardiac infarction. Now, the doctor will transfuse the TPA and the UPA. Why? Why transfuse the UPA? Now, because UPA belongs plasminogen activator, so UPA lead to fibrinogen form and now lead to plasminogen form plasmin. Now, plasmin function, plasmin can hydrolyze fibrin clot. So, the patient clot in heart vessel infarction refer to form clot in heart vessel. So the clot will disappear. Now the heart is ischemia or no? I know it's ischemia. So cardiac contractility will increase, recover. Understand? So infarction. Now if form clot in heart or brain, now use UPA, also use plasmin. Now understand? So during the clinical, if form clot, now use plasminogen activator or plasmin. Now because plasmin can hydrolyze fibrin, hydrolyze thrombin or coagulation factor. Now it is fibrinolytic system. Understand? Now we have learned coagulation. Sleepy. We have learned coagulation system, anticoagulation system, and the fibrinolytic system. Now the next we will learn. Now we have learned platelet. We should not learn VEC, vascular endothelial cell. Understand? Now, function of VEC. What function? Normal VEC have coagulation function or anticoagulation function. Must have anticoagulation function. Now it is vessel. Now it is vascular endothelial cell. Now if have coagulation function, so the people must have form clot. So we see have anticoagulation function. Why it have anticoagulation function? Now, the anticoagulation function include three. First, inhibit platelet aggregation. Second, inhibit coagulation. Now, dissolve the fibrin. Now, so the three functions belong to coagulation function or anticoagulation? Anti. Now, why VEC can inhibit the platelet aggregation? Now we know normal VEC can release nitric oxide, NO, PGI2, ADPase. Now NO, PGI2, coagulation. Now vasodilation factor or vasoconstriction factor. Vasodilation factor. the function ADPase lead to ADP decrease or increase? Lead to ADP decrease. Now ADP function, it can lead to platelet aggregation. So ADPase increase, ADP decrease. So platelet aggregation decrease. Now, so normal VEC can release NO, PGI2, and ADPase lead to vasodilation. So normal VEC lead to vasodilation and inhibit coagulation, platelet aggregation. So have anticoagulation function. Now, from the anticoagulation system, we know normal VEC can release TFPI, TM, and antihistamine 3. Now, antihistamine 3, TM, and TFPI released by VEC. Now, so TFPI function. Remember? TFPI can combine with coagulation factor 10, combined with coagulation the complex tissue factor and the coagulation factor 7. So lead to the complex and the coagulation factor 10 function decrease and inhibit coagulation pathway. So we see how anticoagulation function. Now release TM. TM combined with thrombin lead to thrombin function decrease, can stimulate protein C from activated protein C. Protein C function inhibit function of coagulation factor 5 and factor 8. Now, antihistamine 3 belong to serine protease inhibitor. Coagulation factor 2, factor 11, factor 12 belong to serine protease. Serine protease. So antihistamine 3 belong to serine protease inhibitor. So destroy the activity of the coagulation factors. So antihistamine 3 have anticoagulation function. So normal VEC can release TFPI, TM, and antihistamine 3. Now the 3 substances belong to anticoagulation system or coagulation system. They belong to anticoagulation system. So normal VEC have anticoagulation function. So inhibit coagulation. Now normal VEC also can release TPA and UPA. TPA and UPA belong to which system? Fibrinolytic system. Belong to now plasminogen activator. So it can lead to plasminogen from plasmin. So stimulate fibrinolytic system, lead to plasmin increase, dissolve the fibrin. Now, so we know normal VEC what function? Anticoagulation function. Now, on the contrary, if VEC is damaged, so NO, PGI2, and ADPase increase, vasoconstriction and platelet aggregation. Now, release TFPI, TM, antihistamine 3 decrease, lead to anticoagulation function decrease, coagulation function increase, and form clot. Now the last, release TPA and UPA decrease. Fibrinotic system activated or displaced. Plasmin decrease. So anticoagulation function decrease, coagulation function increase. Understand? Now the balance coagulation system, anticoagulation system, and the fibrinotic system, we see function difficult, but you might remember. Now it is function of normal VEC. So normal VEC have anticoagulation function. Now damaged VEC has procoagulant function. Do some exercise. Now the first, factor 5, factor 10. The complex is called the prothrombin activator. Solely to prothrombin to thrombin. Remember? Fibrinotic system doesn't include which D. Protein C belong to anticoagulation system, belong to protein C system, belong to body fluid anticoagulation system. Now UPA belong to plasminogen activator. Incorrect. Easy. The coagulation tissue factor, factor 3. Now factor 2. Factor 2. Forget. 忘了。Prothrombin. Factor 1. Fibrinogen. Factor 4. Calcium. Remember? Now factor 2 refer to prothrombin. During the coagulation pathway, prothrombin is the most important. Now coagulation pathway is activated. Must the coagulation during the pathway, prothrombin must increase. Thrombin must increase. Now the fourth. The B note. Now tissue damage, it in the tissue. If tissue damage, so it enter the blood. Now it is coagulation pathway, anti-coagulation system, and the fibrinolytic system. Vascular endothelial cell and the platelet have an important role in the balance. So from the land we know coagulation system is activated. At the same time, anti-coagulation system activated, and the next fibrinolytic system is activated. Now it is introduction. The next we will learn the etiology and the mechanism of DIC. DIC is emphasis. What? Section 2. Etiology and the mechanism of DIC. No, it is begin to DIC. Now DIC it is a pathological process. During the shock, we have learned definition of DIC. Now during the DIC, first form microthrombus, and the next coagulation function decrease. Fibrinolytic system is activated, so coagulation function decrease more, and happen bleeding. So during the DIC, not coagulation function, not only coagulation function increase, not only anticoagulation function decrease. Now during the DIC, coagulation function first increase and the next decrease. So first form clot and the next happen bleeding. Now definition we have learned. The clotting factors and the platelet are activated due to the action of the variety of etiological factors. For example, infection, now severe trauma, and operation, tumor, now can simulate coagulation factor and platelets. So the next must lead to thrombin increase, coagulation function increase, and form microthrombus, in the microcirculation. Now what form microthrombus? Coagulation factors and platelet form microthrombus. So what are consumed? Coagulation factors and platelet are consumed. So in the patient blood, coagulation factor and platelet decrease. So coagulation function begin to decrease. Now coagulation system is activated. The next what also activated? Fibrinolytic. So the next fibrinolytic system is activated. What increase? Plasmin increase. Plasmin can hydrolyze fibrin coagulation factor thrombin. So lead to coagulation function decrease. So the next the patient happen bleeding. Now bleeding if severe, so lead to ECBV decrease. So the patient maybe happen shock. Now maybe lead to organ dysfunction, happen heart failure, now respiratory failure, renal failure, and so on. And during the DIC patient, now red blood cell break, so lead to hemolytic anemia. Now the anemia, not red blood cell decrease, concentration decrease, but because of broken. Now, so it's called hemolytic anemia. So from the definition of DIC, we know during DIC it is imbalance coagulation and anticoagulation. Not only increase, not only decrease. It is referred to imbalance of coagulation and anticoagulation. First, coagulation function increase for mitral thrombus. Next, coagulation function decrease and hyperbleeding. Now, from the definition, we know DIC must first coagulation function increase. So etiology of DIC, the etiology must lead to coagulation function increase. Now, microvascular thrombosis. No, clot. Now bleeding. Take a break. The next we learn etiology. Etiology must lead to coagulation function increase. Take a break. Let's continue. Now, etiology of DIC. The etiology must lead to coagulation and coagulation function increase. Now, etiology include 4. Infectious disease, malignant tumor, obstetric complication, operation, and trauma. Now, why they lead to coagulation function increase? Now, coagulation function increase may be viscosity concentration of blood increase. Now, maybe intrinsic, extrinsic coagulation pathway assimilated. Now, maybe VEC damage. Now, maybe platelet aggregation. Now, first, infection. Now, infection disease is the most common cause of DIC, the most. Now, why infection can lead to coagulation function increase? Now, endotoxin can damage VEC. Now, normal VEC have anticoagulation function. Now, damage VEC have procoagulant function. Now, severe infection can lead to coagulation function increase. Malignant tumor, necrosis can release tissue factor, so stimulate extrinsic coagulation pathway. Now, the 3, obstetric complication. Now, obstetric complication can lead to tissue factor move into the blood, so stimulate extrinsic coagulation pathway. Now, the last, operation and trauma. What lead to coagulation function increase? Tissue factor. Operation, trauma, maybe lead to tissue factor move into the blood, stimulate extrinsic coagulation pathway. So, infection, trauma also lead to infectious shock, traumatic shock. So, also lead to shock. Now, during the refractory stage, shock lead to DIC. So we know during the early stage of traumatic shock, infection shock, maybe happen DIC, because trauma infection also lead to DIC. So infection shock and traumatic shock develop DIC maybe in early stage. Maybe early stage happen DIC because trauma and the infection also lead to coagulation function increase. Now, etiology, infection, malignant tumor, and obstetric complication, operation, and trauma. Now, it is so infection disease is the most common etiology of DIC. Now, the pathogenesis of DIC. What can lead to DIC? Why happen DIC? Why lead to coagulation function increase? The pathogenesis include 4. The first, tissue factor move into the circulation, so stimulate in extrinsic coagulation pathway. Extensive tissue injured, so stimulate extrinsic coagulation pathway. The second, damage VEC, vascular endothelial cells, so disturbance of coagulation and anticoagulation. Now, the third, destruction of blood cell and activation of platelet. The last, procoagulants entering circulation. So the pathogenesis of DIC, you might remember the four: intensive tissue injury, stimulate intrinsic coagulation pathway. The second, damage VEC, lead to disturbance coagulation and anticoagulation. Now the third, destruction of red cell, of blood cell and the activation of platelet. The last, procoagulant enter the circulation. Now first, extensive tissue damage, for example, trauma, burn, tumor, malignant tumor, so lead to tissue factor move into the blood. Tissue factor enter blood. Tissue factor and the coagulation factor 7 form complex. The next, simulate coagulation factor 10. Factor 10, factor 5 form complex. It called the activator of prothrombin. So simulate prothrombin form thrombin and lead to fibrinogen form fibrin. Now form clot, fibrin clot. It is intrinsic coagulation pathway. So the first pathogenesis, tissue factor move into the blood. Now the second, damage VEC. Now what can damage VEC? Trauma, hypoxia, antigen antibody complex, acidosis, sepsis, endotoxin. So we know if severe infection, severe hypoxia, severe acidosis can damage VEC and lead to coagulation function increase. So the patient may be hyper DIC, Now, we know it is normal VEC function can inhibit platelet aggregation, inhibit coagulation, can dissolve the fibrin. Now, so we know if VEC damage, why lead to DIC? Why damage VEC lead to DIC? Now, severe acidosis, severe hypoxia. Why severe hypoxia can damage VEC and lead to DIC? The pathogenesis. Now, the first, damage VEC release NO-PGI2 ADP is decreased, so lead to vasoconstriction and platelet aggregation. So coagulation function increase. Now the second, damage VEC release TFPI decrease. Yes. Now release TM decrease. Release antithrombin 3 decrease. So lead to anticoagulation function decrease. So coagulation function increase. So maybe hyper DIC. The last, damage VEC release TPA and UPA decrease, lead to release TPA and UPA decrease. So now simulate or inhibit fibrinolytic center, plasmin decrease, so lead to coagulation function increase and maybe happen DIC. Now normal VEC can't release tissue factor. No damage VEC can release tissue factor. Understand? So damage VEC release tissue factor and stimulate intrinsic coagulation pathway. Now, VEC is damaged. What is exposed? Collagen is exposed. So stimulate coagulation factor 12. So stimulate intrinsic coagulation pathway. So we know VEC damage lead to DIC. The pathogens include how many? 1, 2, 3. Intrinsic and intrinsic coagulation pathway include 5. Understand? Now the first lead to platelet aggregation, vasoconstriction. The second lead to coagulation function increase, anticoagulation function decrease, fibrinolytic function decrease, coagulation function increase. Damage VEC release tissue factor, so stimulate intrinsic coagulation pathway. Now collagen exposed, so stimulate coagulation factor 12 and stimulate intrinsic coagulation pathway. So damage VEC now lead to disturbance of coagulation and anticoagulation and lead to DIC. The pathogens include 5. The first, stimulate intrinsic coagulation pathway. The second, stimulate intrinsic coagulation pathway. Now the third, lead to platelet aggregation. Now lead to anticoagulation of VEC decrease, coagulation function increase. Now lead to fibrinolytic function decrease. Now dissolve the fibrin decrease, coagulation function increase. So if severe hypoxia, severe acidosis, now severe infection can damage VEC, the patient may be hyper DIC. The pathogens include 5. Now you might remember the pathogens include 5. Now, the third, destruction of blood cell and activation of platelet. Now, severe peripheral red blood cell destruction. Red blood cell destruction release ADP. ADP function, platelet aggregation. So lead to coagulation function increase. Now, so destruction of blood cell, red blood cell can lead to DIC. Now, white blood cell can release tissue factor like urgent. So also stimulate intrinsic coagulation pathway. Now, mononucleophosphate also release tissue factor. So stimulate intrinsic coagulation pathway. Now platelet aggregation. Now activated platelet. So platelet will aggregation. So lead to coagulation function increase. So we know if blood cell now destruction of blood cell maybe release ADP. Red blood cell break. Now release ADP. Now white blood cell maybe release tissue factor like urgent. So stimulate intrinsic coagulation pathway and lead to platelet aggregation, lead to coagulation function increase. Now, destruction of blood cell and activation of platelet lead to coagulation function increase, maybe hyper DIC. Procoagulant interim circulation. Now, acute necrotic pancreatitis. Now, because there is into the blood. Now can activate prothrombin, so stimulate coagulation pathway. Now snake winner. Now snake bite. Now snake winner can activate coagulation factor 10 and factor 5. So stimulate coagulation pathway and form maybe happen DIC. Now amniotic fluid embolism or tumor cell enter the blood can activate coagulation factor 10. So also lead to coagulation factor increase. So the coagulants enter the circulation may be stimulate extrinsic and intrinsic coagulation pathway. So lead to coagulation function increase, maybe happen DIC. So if now bite by a snake, maybe happen DIC, because snake venom can stimulate coagulation factor 10 and factor 5. Now it is pathogenesis of DIC. You must remember the pathogenesis include pathogenesis of DIC include 4. First, extensive tissue damage. Now tissue factor enter blood, assimilate in extrinsic coagulation pathway. The second, VEC damage lead to disturbance of coagulation and anticoagulation function. Now the third, destruction of blood cell and platelet aggregation. The last, procoagulants enter in circulation. Now it is pathogenesis of DIC. Now hypoxia, ischemia, antigen-antibody urgent, and infection can damage VEC. Damage VEC lead to DIC. The pathogenesis include 5. Extrinsic, intrinsic coagulation pathway stimulated, platelet aggregation, coagulation function increase, anticoagulation decrease, fibrinolytic inhibit. Now, it is pathogenesis of DIC. Now it is although the cause of DIC are complicated, but the pathogenesis formation and the development of DIC are associated with platelet aggregation, intrinsic, extrinsic coagulation pathway stimulated, and the fibrinolytic function decrease. Now, coagulation function increase may be intrinsic and extrinsic coagulation pathway stimulated, maybe fibrinolytic function decrease, maybe anticoagulation function decrease, platelet aggregation. Now maybe blood concentration viscosity increase. Now to exercise is it? DIC?太想气。Easy. The last. It is imbalance, not only coagulation function increase, not decrease. First increase and the next decrease. It is imbalance. Number 6. Now, hemolysis, red blood cell break, release ADP, release ADP. B. Understand? Tissue damage. A. Tissue factor. Tissue factor. Now, it also damage VEC, but the most intrinsic coagulation pathway. Treatment can simulate coagulation factor 10. D. Easy. The most common etiology is infection. The key step for the pathogenesis of DIC. Coagulation function increase from the definition. What increase? Thrombin. Now, coagulation, intrinsic and extrinsic coagulation pathway. The key step which increase thrombin, prothrombin from thrombin. It is the key step. So, pathogenesis of DIC, the key step is prothrombin from thrombin. Now, it is etiology and mechanism of DIC. The next, we will learn factor influencing of the development of DIC. Now, factor influencing the development of DIC, it also called the triggering factor. Triggering factor, not etiology. Understand? Now, no etiology, no disease. Now, if etiology, if have triggering factor, now the patient may be happen quickly. If triggering factor, the factors can enhance disease happen. Understand? So, if have triggering factor, have etiology, the disease happen quickly, happen easy. Understand? Now, if no etiology, no disease, no triggering factor, maybe have disease. Understand? The disease may be no triggering factor, but disease must have etiology. No etiology, no disease. Now, no triggering factor, maybe have disease. Now, factors influencing the development of DIC, triggering factors of DIC include 4. The first, damage function of mononuclear factor system. mononuclear factor serum belong to cellular anticoagulation system, have anticoagulation function. Impairment of liver function. Some coagulation factors released by liver. Now, hypercoagulable status of blood. Now, hypercoagulable, so lead to coagulation function increase. Now, disorder of microcirculation, for example, refractory stage of shock. Now, the first damage function of mononuclear factor system. We know mononuclear factor system can phagocytate or remove necrosis tissue, endotoxin, and coagulation factors. Now, if the system damage, so phagocytate coagulation factor will decrease. So in the patient, coagulation factor will increase. So coagulation function increase, maybe happen DIC, Now, if traumatic, the trauma, infection, the mononuclear factor syndrome, phagocytate coagulation factors will decrease. Why? Now, trauma, infection, the patient, mononuclear factor syndrome, phagocytate coagulation function will decrease. Why decrease? Now, trauma have necrosis tissue. Understand? Now, infection have endotoxin. So, mononuclear phagocytate system now phagocytate a lot of necrosis tissue and endotoxin. So, the system can't phagocytate coagulation factors. Understand? Trauma, infection, the patient maybe happen DIC, because the phagocytate system can't phagocytate coagulation factors. So the patient coagulation factors will increase. Impairment of liver function. The hepatic cell can synthesize anticoagulants and fibrinolysis materials, and also inactivate coagulation factors. So if impairment of liver, so release anticoagulants will decrease, and the depressed coagulation factor will also decrease. So coagulation factor function will increase. Now, impairment of liver, so the patient coagulation function will increase. Now, maybe happen at DIC. Now, hypercoagulable status of blood, pregnancy. The woman, during the pregnant, the woman's viscosity, now coagulation function increase. Now, the normal pregnant woman coagulation function will increase after 3 weeks after 3 weeks. Now, so platelet and the coagulation factor will increase now since the 3rd week of pregnancy. So the patient coagulation function will increase. So the patient may be hyper-DIC easy. Substance of anticoagulations and fibrinolysis reduce. Now, hypercoagulable status of blood, acidosis. Acidosis can damage VC. Damage VC can lead to coagulation function increase. Now, acidosis can depress anticoagulation activity of heparin. Now, acidosis can lead to heparin function decrease, so lead to coagulation function increase. Now, acidosis can enhance the activity of coagulation factor. Now, lead to coagulation factor increase. Now, can lead to platelet aggregation. So, acidosis, if hyperacidosis, the patient hyper-DIC easy. Now, it is hypercoagulable status of blood. Now, disorder of microcirculation. Now, during the shock is divided into 3 stages: ischemic hypoxia stage, and stagnant hypoxia stage, refractory stage. Now, which stage hyper-DIC? Refractory stage. If infected shock, traumatic shock, may be early stage hyper-DIC. The other types of shock during the refractory stage hyper-DIC. Now, so during the stage, must coagulation function increase. Now, during the refractory stage, what happens? During the stage, happen vasodilation, paralytic vasodilation. Now, blood flow very, very slowly, even no perfusion, no flow. Now, congestion more. So plasma move out more. Viscosity increase more. Viscosity increase, so lead to red blood cell and platelet aggregation. So lead to coagulation function increase. So maybe hyper-DIC. So if disorder of microcirculation may be hyper-DIC. Now it is treatment of DIC include 4. First, which damage? Mononucleophosphate damage. The second, impairment of liver. The third, hypercoagulable status, pregnancy and acidosis. The last, microcirculation disorder. Now, disorder of microcirculation. Now, it is triggering. Now, you might remember which is triggering factor, which is etiology. Now, etiology include etiology of DIC also include 4. First, most etiology of DIC infection. Infection is the most common etiology. The second, malignant tumor. The third, obstetric complication. the last, operation and trauma. Operation and trauma. Now it is etiology. Treatment also for. You might distinguish etiology and triggering factors. No etiology, no disease. Triggering factor can, if have etiology, and the patient have triggering factors, the patient happen quickly, easy. Now it is etiology, triggering factors. Now, which one of the following doesn't belong to the etiology of DIC? Not etiology. Now trauma etiology. Severe infection is the most. Hypocoagulable status of blood, it is triggering factor. Acute leukemia, it belongs to malignant tumor, it is etiology. Understand? Amniotic fluid embolus belong to obstetric complication. So only C, not etiology, belong to triggering factor. Hypercoagulable status of blood. If it's not hypercoagulable status of blood, it is pregnancy, acidosis. It also. Now, mononuclear facets, mononuclear facets, system damage, or liver impaired. Now, it belongs to triggering factors, not etiology. Now, it is DIC. Now, it is factors influencing of development of DIC is also called triggering factors. Now we have learned definition of DIC, etiologies, and the mechanism of DIC, triggering factors. Now you might remember definition, etiology, and pathogenesis. Pathogenesis also include 4. Now you might remember. And remember triggering factor. So we know DIC, all you might remember. SOC, all you might remember. SOC and DIC emphasis, you might remember. Now clinical stage and classification. According to the development of DIC is divided into 3 stages: hypercoagulable stage, hypercoagulable stage, and hypocoagulable stage, and fibrinolytic system stage. Now 3 stage it is emphasis also, you might remember. Now what time? 下课。那下课吧。The next class we will learn 3 stage. Now class over 吧。Now very well. So sleepy. 累。Why? 考试考完了 over. 还有哪？哦。